Howdy. Thanks so much for joining us for this mini podcast / talk on telepsychology from our trainee perspectives. I'm Dr. Carly McCord. I'm a licensed psychologist. I'm the director of telebehavioral care at Texas A&M, and I'm a clinical assistant professor in our departments of psychiatry and educational psychology. And I've got two of my very best trainees here with you today to talk about their experiences.
I am Mariah Stickley, as you can see there in the middle. I am currently a fourth-year doctoral student in the Texas A&M Counseling Psychology program, and I have been doing telehealth in my training as both a program coordinator with the telebehavioral care program and as a practicum therapist since the end of my first year, so 2.5 years now. When I've been doing that both through A&M and through Baylor Scott and White's Warriors Research Institute.
And my name is Kaylee Jackson. I am a third-year student in the Counseling Psychology doctoral program here at A&M. I am also a program coordinator at the Telebehavioral Care program, and so that's been my telehealth experience as well as a practicum student at the clinic. So I've been doing practicum there as well as through our primary clinic, seeing some people over telehealth there in a primary care setting.
Excellent. So that's who we are. So the Texas A&M Telebehavioral Care Program, we started providing telehealth services back in 2009 from a HRSA grant, which is a partnership between our School of Public Health and our Educational Psychology Department, where we wanted to respond to needs in a rural area where they had literally no other providers, and thought, well, why can't we have our doctoral students provide services? And that was actually my very first assistantship. And then years later, and many grants later, we've kept this thing alive, and we have a hub and spoke model that serves 8 counties in the region around Texas A&M. We've got services in community health resource centers and primary care clinics, and now in correctional facilities and in our schools. So we've implemented in a lot of different places. We've trained over 80 doctoral students and served over 1,000 clients and over 11,500 hours of counseling services. So that's the expertise that we're bringing to you today. And we hope that some of our experiences are useful to you. So first I wanted to talk about why is it important for trainees to get experience in service delivery via telehealth?
I can start us off. So from my perspective, it has been so helpful for me to get training in providing therapy via telehealth modalities, both video conferencing and over the phone. Because I think like when you are first getting into something, it's a little bit less scary. You've got so many people around you to support you. You've got your supervisor, you've got the folks who work at the clinic. So when you are delving into that as a trainee, you oftentimes have a lot more support than you would have if you're getting into it later on after you have developed your own practice or are in a practice where maybe everyone is just starting to get into telehealth. So I think first and foremost, getting that experience as a trainee is foundational for you moving forward, and it also helps you be prepared in situations like we're in now. I have friends from a bunch of different clinics that have either lost a lot of hours this semester and even moving into potentially losing more hours over the summer and into next year in order to keep themselves and their clients safe, or folks who have undergone a lot of stress because they hadn't had telehealth training prior to COVID-19. And so now, on top of all their other responsibilities, they're rushing to also gain competency, and their supervisors are rushing to gain competency so that they can provide continuation of services.
Yeah, Mariah, I think you bring up a good point about kind of the current circumstances that we're in being a really good example of why it's so important for us to have this training in telehealth, as well as the support that you receive as a trainee. Something else that I had thought about of like why this is so important and integral is even if you don't plan to do telehealth in your practice kind of after you graduate, I think it just makes you more marketable. It's just a great skill to have. I know we primarily work with rural clients where this is one of the only ways that they can gain access to services, which is super important. But even if you don't plan to work with those populations where those access barriers are a really big deal, it's just a nice thing to have to be able to say, hey, I know you're traveling to a different city next week, but we still want to have a session. Let's meet over telehealth, find a space. And so I think it just, even along with all of the things that telehealth does, like overcome those access barriers and provide services to places in rural settings where they don't have it otherwise, it also just opens up this whole other way that you can deliver services to every population and all of the people that you see. So even if you don't see yourself going into kind of these places where telehealth is the first and foremost way that you're providing services, I think it just makes you so much more marketable as a service provider to be able to have that experience and say, hey, here's something I can offer you.
For sure.
Yeah, I would like to hit home the importance of increasing access to care and reducing disparities for marginalized populations, for rural populations, that telehealth really has a great ability to overcome those barriers. And so I think equipping this next generation of psychologists and health professionals with this tool that can help reduce disparities is something that should be interwoven into their training. Okay, what are the biggest challenges in delivering services via telehealth?
I think for me, one of the biggest ones that come to mind, especially in our clinic, is the technology capability that we see with a bunch of our rural clients in rural settings. We have all of this stuff in place, but maybe the infrastructure isn't there in our rural counties for them to have good enough Wi-Fi or good enough data on their cell service to be able to actually log in and plug into the service. I think phone call sessions, so phone sessions rather than video sessions, are a great way to overcome that barrier. But I think for us that's one of the biggest ones that we see.
That's a great point. I think the other thing we did to try and overcome that is the hub and spoke model. So right now everybody's kind of in their homes and you do rely on having a device with a good enough connection if you want to do video. But by identifying kind of key access points within communities is another way to overcome that. And I agree, even the evidence base would suggest that audio-only telephone sessions are also equally as effective for delivering our evidence-based interventions.
Yeah, I would say as someone who does a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy, a lot of cognitive processing therapy, that the question that I get the most from other trainees who maybe haven't done telehealth is like, how do you get the workbooks to the client? How do you get the worksheets to the client? And I will say that depending upon the resources of your clinic, that sometimes you do have to get creative. At Warriors Research Institute, we have a way to send emails in a encrypted and HIPAA compliant way, and so I'm able to email those worksheets to clients. But I've also found the worksheet online and told the client verbally, hey, go to this website and look at this worksheet. Or if it's a more simplistic worksheet, you might say, okay, get a piece of paper in front of you. This is what I want you to write. And then this is what I want you to write under that. And this is what I want you to write under that. So we do have to sometimes get creative in the way that we get those materials to clients. But it is possible, it is doable, and it can be kind of fun to overcome those challenges with your client together. And a lot of times the same skills that they use in overcoming those barriers are going to be skills that are then transferable to the other things that they're overcoming in their life. So small victories.
Those are great points. For me, from the administrative side, I think it's just challenging to incorporate this web of legal and ethical considerations, and then you have a number of guidelines available to you, and then maybe you work in an organization and you have organizational policies to abide by and adhere to. And we've all many of us have been thrown into telepractice, and a lot of the therapy work transfers fairly easily. There are some things you have to get creative about or adjust to, and that you get better with over time. And I don't have a magic solution for the web, but I think just knowing that those are different things to attend to, of knowing what your state laws are, because a lot of times when we do trainings, there's no way to be state specific. So it's always referring back to your own state's rules, and then just giving yourself some time with your ethics code and thinking about, do any of these codes apply to telehealth? It doesn't, APA's ethics codes don't specifically mention telehealth. But I think working within the boundaries of your competence, telehealth can get you anywhere. And so just making sure you're competent in telehealth and competent to do the services generally. And then, of course, APA has some guidelines available, and there's some state and national, international organizations that also have guidelines. And our team here just took some of the 5 best available guidelines and condensed them into a slightly more digestible model that we would be happy to share if you inquire later. But it's a challenge you can overcome. It's worth pressing on. Okay, let's shift into what is telesupervision. The literature would say they've defined it 2 ways. One is supervision of telehealth work. The other would be conducting supervision from a distance. I think that latter is probably the more critical piece here and now of providing supervision for trainees from a distance. And previously, many states had regulations about the amount of supervision. American Psychological Association, their Council on Accreditation, had regulations of at least half of your supervision needed to be in person. A lot of those have been lifted so that we can continue practice during the pandemic, but again, something to be aware of. So we're going to talk a little bit about distance supervision. So tell us about your experiences with telesupervision, and what have been some of the challenges and benefits of those experiences?
I can start. I have had probably an equal amount of telesupervision and in-person supervision, and I can genuinely say that I haven't noticed a huge difference between the two. Similarly to my relationship with my clients over telehealth is just as strong. My relationship with my supervisor is just as strong. And we're always conducting supervision over a HIPAA compliant platform. So when it comes to watching tape, usually my supervisor has the same access to the same database that I do. And so she can pull it up on her end, and we can do that together still in the same way that we would if we were in the room together. We've also gotten creative. There was like one part of a session that I wanted a supervisor to hear. And I was able to just like share my screen and play it for her. And because it was a HIPAA compliant platform, that worked great for us. And I think also it gets us used to contacting our supervisors, through the phone or through video conferencing, when oftentimes when I most need supervision is not our planned supervision anyway. And so getting used to that and developing our relationship around that has been really helpful. I'm not even sure how much I can speak to challenges I've experienced. I think in the same way that you need to protect your time in like a physical in-person meeting space, you need to protect it over telehealth. So making sure that you're both being mindful of like when the supervision session needs to end, beginning on time so that we can all like take breaks and get away from the screen. But other than that, I've had an awesome experience with telesupervision.
I think you make a great point about the getting used to contacting your supervisor over the phone. Because I've almost found, I would say I've probably had an equal number of in-person and telesupervision as well. And I would say that I've almost felt that my telesupervisors are more accessible because I feel more comfortable picking up the phone and texting them, because that's more of an established, like, this is how we communicate, even outside of that normal session, where I was, granted, my in-person supervision was a lot earlier in my training, so I may not have been as eager to reach out. But I almost felt like if my supervisor's not on site, then they're probably busy, like, doing whatever they're doing, and I don't want to, like, bother them. Whereas now I'm like, I'm just going to text you and you'll get back to me and you get back to me. So I almost feel like they're more available over telesupervision than they were in person, which is a really interesting dynamic, I guess.
Yeah, I'll add to that in saying that I think that regularly doing telesupervision fosters and like encourages conversations about communication. And that's something that I think we can kind of forget when we're just doing in-person work. And being able to have conversations about like when you expect to be, like when your supervisor expects for you to contact them, talking about like what are the ways that I can reach out to you, talking about setting boundaries around your time and around your supervisor's time are all such meaningful and important experiences. And I have found that those are more cognizant when I'm doing telesupervision.
Yeah. And all parallel process to doing teletherapy and things, boundary setting and communicating how and when to reach you when working with your clients from a distance too.
Yeah, for sure. I think the other thing that comes up for me about telesupervision is just the like accessibility to knowledge. I know like I really valued being able to work with a telesupervisor who serves in like a primary care setting, which we wouldn't necessarily find here if we were limited to like just the supervisors we have available in College Station. So I think kind of like Mariah, I don't know that I can really speak to the challenges piece, but I've seen a whole bunch of benefits.
Yeah, that speaks to why we started this program. So we were pretty small staff. I was doing most of the supervision, had some really wonderful doctoral students who were Spanish speaking and really wanted a Spanish speaking supervisor, reasonably so. And those are hard to come by here. And so we started this telesupervision program so we could pair our Spanish-speaking counselors with Spanish-speaking supervisors. And that expanded to pairing expertises with in trauma or in primary care or with kids that we've been able to expand our services by having these telesupervisors provide the 1 hour of weekly supervision. They can read notes remotely. They can watch video remotely. And then we overcame the 50% rule originally by having our group supervision time in person every week. And of course, the counselors used to all be on site. My experience with telesupervision is mostly using it while traveling to keep in touch with my in-person supervisees, and also in some of the research we've done. So there's very little research about telesupervision. One, because it's hard to research it when there's regulations against it. You can't ever do a pure telesupervision kind of comparison, but we did do a single case study and mixed methods, both looking at Supervisory Working Alliance, and also some focus groups about their experiences. I'm getting more of these same responses of, one, if it's a bad supervisor or bad supervisory experience, the modality didn't matter. And when it's a good supervisory experience, the modality doesn't matter. It's really parallel to the research in telehealth services generally. Okay. What should supervisors know about how to support trainees during the COVID-19 crisis and beyond?
I think for me, I think this parallels kind of what we were talking about telesupervision in general. But that availability piece, especially as we're all now working from home and aren't in the clinic and kind of have that contact with our people who are there in person, but just communicating about your availability. And saying like, hey, here's when you can contact me, where you may not be able to step out and consult with people who are in your office like you can normally. So feel free to text me. Feel free to give me a call even outside of our regularly scheduled supervision hours. So I think that availability piece is huge, especially as we're all a little bit more isolated in our practice. And then on kind of the flip side of that, like also having good boundaries for like and encouraging good boundaries as a supervisor and as a trainee. I think we're all a little bit more fatigued and experiencing a whole bunch of different feelings with this COVID-19 crisis and all working from home. And so I think checking in on that fatigue and encouraging everyone to set really good boundaries between work and home life when it's all kind of blurred together, and give people room to take breaks when they need to.
Yeah, I think that the most impactful things that my telesupervisors have done in the past couple months is allowing space in supervision for me to process how everything that is going on in our environment is impacting me and impacting my work as a therapist. And just allowing space for that, I think, has been really beneficial. Though even in that context, I think that supervisors, or at least like the most impactful supervisors that I've had, have also allowed me space to process like how grad school is impacting me. So yes, COVID-19 is massively impactful on most people I know, but so is grad school. And so I think it's using those the same principles that you would use with the supervisee in any difficult situation. Just allowing space to, talk about it and process it and problem solve around it is super helpful.
I think the thing that comes to my mind that I've heard from many of my trainees is, and Kaylee shared a little bit of the flip side of this, but that even if you say, hey, I'm real accessible, this is when you can contact me, reach out anytime, there's this odd thing about being at home and not knowing what everyone else is doing, that for a lot of trainees makes it feel difficult to reach out. Like, oh, what if I'm bothering them? Or interrupting something, and so they just don't reach out. So I would say, it's on us as supervisors to take time to reach out, maybe even outside of supervision, and just say, hey, I'm thinking about you. How are you doing? And just making sure that our trainees feel cared for as people and not just trainees. So that's my 2 cents worth. That's actually the end of kind of our prompts today. We really appreciate you letting us come into your space and your world and share a little bit about our experiences with telehealth service delivery and telesupervision. I apologize. I should have had a slide with our website or our email address, but it's telehealth@tamu.edu, tamu.edu. So if you have any questions and you think we could be helpful, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Yeah, we love offering support and consultation. We're super passionate about telehealth and the work that we do. So whether you are a supervisor or a trainee, if you want to connect, we would be more than happy to talk about any more specific questions that you have.